Good morning. Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey. Book 3 of the Expanse series, which I am still working my way through. Yeah, so I just finished this. I love that they've taken 3 whole books of this series to get to the point where you're like, oh, the Expanse must refer to this thing. And now there's going to be some, like, galactic exploration, so that'll be fun. Okay, so this book, mixed feelings, I think. I liked it for what it was, but I also missed some of the characters that I really liked from book 2. I've, like, spent a lot of this book being like, I wonder what they're doing on Earth. I wonder how Avasarala is, like, yelling at people and grouching, and how's Bobby, you know, like, I'm like, I liked those characters so much. I really wanted more of them. Maybe there'll be more of them in the future. I don't know. Yeah, so this finally was just like, oh yeah, let's really, like, have some crazy nonsense. Yeah, so I enjoyed it, and I'm certainly curious as to what is going to happen in the future and where the series is going to go, and we'll definitely be reading book 4 soonish. I don't know what it's called, but luckily they're all labeled, so I can just go to the library and find it. I don't know what else to say about it. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this when I was talking about book 2, but it's super relevant for this book as well. I love the concept of the Mormon generation ship, the Nauvoo, and in this book they changed the name to the Behemoth. I love this ship. Of course I do. I'm a Babylon 5 fan. Naturally, I'm going to love any spacecraft in anything that involves rotating. Like, it rotates and it has farms. Love it. Okay, so, I hope to give it back to the Mormons, and then the Mormons just, like, go through the ring and, like, go and colonize some planet a gazillion light years away in a different, like, reality or whatever. I hope that's what happens. I really liked Bull and Anna. I was less interested in Clarissa/Melba, which is too bad because, like, she's the character who had an actual, like, character arc. But I was like, fine, whatever. But it looks like she might continue being in the books. I don't know, I was a little unsure because they implied both, okay, we're gonna take her back to Earth for trial, but it also sounded like they were planning on, like, traveling through one of the other gates and, like, maybe taking her with them. I don't know. It was a little bit unclear. I got different messages from a couple of different chapters at the end there, and it was like, well, I don't know what's gonna happen. So I don't know, maybe we'll be seeing more of her. She would be kind of an interesting addition to their crew. But I have no clue. So, more interesting stuff about, like, as I continue reading the crew of the Rocinante, I can't pronounce that, I don't know, definitely continues to grow on me. One thing I was doing while reading this was just kind of consciously comparing elements of it to different things that I'm familiar with, like, I don't know if they're really relevant to talk about. I was like, how much is Holden like Sheridan, for one thing? They have a similar vibe to me, although they're coming from different angles and ultimately doing different things. But I was like, in some ways, isn't Holden a little bit like what if Sheridan never had Delenn to explain to him what the dick was happening at any given time? You know, because in this he's got ghost robot Miller, who is, oh Jesus, I'm so sad about Miller all the time whenever he's, like, on page. Not so much ghost robot Miller, but, like, Miller the person who is dead, you know? I'm like, it's just so depressing to me that he wanted to die and then he died. I don't know. Whatever. poor Miller and his stupid hat, which I love that every single time he shows up, Holden has to be like, his hat is so stupid, like, in his narration. But I really do like Robot Ghost Construct, Miller, and his, like, kind of his knowledge that he has elements, you know, his knowledge that he isn't really Miller, but has his memories and his skills and whatnot. And that despite, I mean, I love that exchange at the end where he compares his programming basically to figure out what happened to all of these aliens who've been dead for 1 billion years. Where he compares that programming to, like, if you told the Rocinante to go to a certain place and then you all dropped dead, it would still go there, even though there's no point anymore, you know. So it's kind of like, but, like, he's self-aware enough to, like, know this, but not really be able to do anything about it. It's just, he's tragic. So, he's probably still my favorite. But I liked Anna so much, and I liked Bull so much, and I think, like, I like the choice that the authors make to draw out characters who have extremely different, like, worldviews on a base level, and just kind of play around with how they're approaching situations. I think it's really cool. Obviously, Bull died. Spoilers, who cares? I obviously don't care about spoilers when I talk about these books. And I was really sad about that because I liked him. And thank you that Anna is gonna, like, go back to Earth and be with her adorable family. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we never see her again, but, like, at least we know that she's, like, living a happy life. My hopes for book 4, I want them to go through a gate and find some crazy shit on the other side. And I want to see Avasarala again. And those are two things that don't really mesh, because they are happening in completely different spheres. But, like, I feel like one thing the next book really needs to do, like, two things the next book really needs to do are have some galactic exploration and also have, like, how this affects the political situation between Earth, Mars, and the OPA. Like, how is the fact that galactic exploration is now within our very easy reach going to affect, like, everything back on the planets where people live. So, yeah. I'm hoping to see that. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, I don't know what book 4 is called, mainly because, like, with the other books, I knew what they were called because these editions have a little bit from the beginning of the next book in the back, except this one has a bit from the beginning of a book in a completely different series. So in the other cases, I was looking back there and being like, oh, the next book is called Caliban's War. But in this case, I'm like, well, this is useless to me. And the title might give me a clue as to what the focus of the next book's going to be on, but I don't know it, so whatever. I'll find out later, and, well, you probably already know. But if you don't know, you will find out when I find out. Anyway, yeah, so that's enough. I liked it. Goodbye. Jingo by Terry Pratchett. It's like the ugliest cover. But hey, it was at Half Price Books. So Discworld. I have not mentioned Discworld before on here, but I fucking love Discworld. I've read, I think, about 15 of the books so far, maybe almost 20. And Jingo was a reread because I love it, and I wanted to read it again. I feel like if you know anything about my tastes in fiction, then the fact that the City Watch books are my favorite Discworld books would not surprise you at all. I fucking love them. I love Vimes. My favorite kind of fantasy, honestly, because there's magic, but, like, it's not about wizards. I mean, except the books that are, but I don't even really know where to start here. Jingo is so fucking good. Like, it's so good. Like, the first kind of 100 pages are about, like, the lead up to this war, and they're just kind of these rumblings, and people being like, I know which way the wind is blowing, and people being, like, racist, and there's an attempt on the life of the Clatchian ambassador to Ankh-Morpork, and so that's sort of Vimes' excuse for getting involved, and, oh, Lord. Okay, so if you don't know anything about Discworld, I don't even really know where to start to tell you about it, but it's this massive fantasy series. It doesn't really need to be read in any kind of order, and not all of the books are about the same people. Some books are standalone, some books are about certain groups of people, so there's like a bunch of books that are about the witches, there's a bunch of books about the City Watch, Jingo is one of them. There's books about Death. Death as a character appears, I think, in every single book of Discworld I read somewhere. He's in this one for one page. But yeah, so Jingo itself, it's one of sort of the, I guess, the middle City Watch books. Because, like, I think it's like the fourth one or something. And, yeah, and it's about, well, a lot of the City Watch books end up being about tensions arising or murders or whatever, and they tie into various kinds of, like, fantastical bigotry. Like, not all of the Watch books are like that, but a lot of them are. You know, whether it's the dwarves and the trolls hate each other, or maybe we should be nicer to gnomes, or whatever. And I mean, they're all fantastic. The only one I have not read is The Fifth Elephant, because basically once it got to that point, I realized, oh my god, there's only one City Watch book I haven't read. I have to save it. I have to save it forever. So who knows when I'll read that. But anyway, so Jingo is like, did you have fun reading about fantastic racism? Ha ha ha, here's some, like, real racism with other humans. And essentially Clatch is like Arabia, and Ankh-Morpork is like England. And London, specifically, really. And there you go. It's a wonderful book. My favorite parts are probably, like, well, okay, so I love all the, basically whenever Vimes and Lord Rust are in the same room, because Vimes just hates Lord Rust so much, deservedly, and I love that Vimes is that bitch who will go to a meeting and just constantly make, like, sarcastic asides. All of the stuff that he gets up to in the desert is great, especially once he meets up with 71-Hour Ahmed, and by that point, Vimes has kind of figured out what's going on, and, like, they have their whole conversation, and he thinks about big crimes, and, you know, what do you do? You can arrest a guy for murder, but what do you do when you know that people have been, you know, wanting to start a war? It's such a big crime, you know, how could he possibly do anything about it? And it's like, invent international criminal law. But anyway, you know, and it's just, oh god, it's a lot. It's a lot, and some of it is quite funny, too. But, oh, I also am extremely fond of this, especially, like, early in the book when they're all still in Ankh-Morpork, and there's some scenes where, like, Nobby and Colin are just, like, walking around, and I just love those because Colin is just, like, he's so stupid, and he'll be saying things, you know, and it's jingoism and it's racism and stuff, and then Nobby always kind of pokes all these holes in everything that he says, because Nobby is cleverer. He's, like, you know, kind of stupid too, but he's cleverer than Colin, and in kind of a, like, a way where he'll be like, well, that doesn't really make any sense, you know. Oh, Carrot is great in this too, and Angua. Carrot delight, like, there's all these references also to Lawrence of Arabia, like, mostly specifically the movie, but sometimes less specifically. And just kind of in general, but that's once you've gotten through most of the book and they're, like, running around with the Discworld equivalent of the Bedouin, like, in the desert. Just, I love everything about this book. Like every single plot thread. I mean, you know how some books you're like, well, I'm really just reading this for, like, the A plot with Vimes or whatever. But in this book, it's like, no, I like all the plots. They're all great. I love reading them all. Oh, jeez, I could go on. Oh, yeah, and then of course this is the one that ends with him becoming a duke, and he's not particularly happy about that, but I really like the ending of this book because it's just this wonderful scene where, you know, when he starts chasing the thief and then everyone else is following him. And it's just like, yep, we'll have problems later, but right now he's just like, yes, the chase. Vimes is great. Oh boy, the whole scene where he's just like, I'm arresting these armies. Oh god. Oh Jesus. Okay. Anyway, I feel like a lot of my talking about this book is probably a bit incomprehensible if you've never read it. I'm sorry, but it is a fantastic book. I think if I were going to pick my favorite Vimes book, it would be Night Watch. But also Night Watch is a bit atypical because it doesn't include most of the other regular characters. This one because I forgot a lot of the things that happen in this book because it's been a little while since I'd read it. There's this wonderful bit after they've kind of, Vetinari has showed up at the battlefield, and so the Watch members are just kind of lounging around and shooting shit or whatever, and I just love that Detritus is just kind of like on the ground, like, because it's hot and he's stupid when it's hot, and I love that Angua is just sort of lying on top of him because he's like basically a big rock and she's just kind of sunning herself. And they're a fun group, really. I like them all together, so Night Watch doesn't have that dynamic, but by this point, especially like Jingo does, but like the earlier books less so because either the characters aren't around yet or they don't get along as well yet. Like, but whatever. I love all the City Watch books, and like, God. Anyway, I think I'll shut up now, but it was wonderful and delightful to read Jingo again, and it's been, it's made me think, like, gosh, there are so many Discworld books I want to reread. I especially want to reread Thud, because due to poor planning on my part, that is no planning at all, Thud was the first Watch book I read. So I read Going Postal, and then I read Monstrous Regiment, and in Monstrous Regiment, I actually registered the character of Vimes, because he's in a bit of it, and was like, I want to know more about this guy, and also Angua was in it, and I want to know more about the werewolf lady. So I was, looking at what Discworld books had at the library, and they had Thud, and I was like, oh hey, this is Vimes, I will read this book. Oh my god, I didn't know what was going on. I sort of think back on it, and I'm like, what happened in Thud? I don't understand it. I think it's just kind of that the climax is I don't know what the fuck happened in the climax, which is a problem I will say I often have with Discworld novels, where the climax will just be so many things, and I'm like, I cannot keep track of this. This one, I was fine with. But there was nothing magical or, like, supernatural going on at the end of this book either, so I think that helped. But I really like to reread Thud. I'd also really like to reread, like, basically every single City Watch book, and also probably, like, Monstrous Regiment and Small Gods. And maybe actually read one that I haven't read before for once. I don't know what, because I think there's one or two at the library that I haven't read. I don't remember. They might have Interesting Times or something. But then I may have to actually order them from another library. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm really gonna shut up now, but I really love Discworld, and the people I watch on BookTube never talk about it, because they're always talking about, like, new stuff, and Discworld is my kind of fantasy, so, because it's, like, it is fantasy, but, it's barely fantasy. I don't know how to put that. It's low fantasy, I guess. What does that mean? I don't know. I'm gonna go now, but I'm just in paroxysms of delight over this book, as always. Okay, I finished listening to Roma by Stephen Saylor. The novel of ancient Rome. Try to keep this quick. So the basic premise of this is it tells a series of vignettes over the course of about 1,000 years of history from before anyone even lived in the area where the city of Rome is, until Augustus Caesar. And, yeah, so it's about 1,000 years of history, and it's told by following members of two families who have ancestry that, like, lived in the area even before Rome, and then were important patrician families, and I think they're made up, probably. And it was okay. Like, it was fine. I mean, it wasn't amazing, but, one good thing was that if you didn't like one of the stories, there was always going to be another one, so, like, and I'm a nerd about Roman history because I took a class on it in college, and I read I, Claudius, and I don't know, I went through a phase. And, I like historical fiction that's set in ancient Rome. So it was fine. It wasn't like, none of the characters were really that compelling, and none of the stories were really that compelling, but I did enjoy listening to it. And I do want to read the second book. I haven't actually read the synopsis of it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a continuation. That, or it's the same basic idea, starting around around like 1 AD or whatever. I don't even know what year this is, but starting around that point and then going for the next however many centuries until Rome falls or something. I don't know exactly how long it would go, and I don't know if it'll follow the same families, because part of the deal is by the time you get to the end of this, the character in the last story is a member of both of the families technically, but he only knows one, and the other one disappeared. But the thing is, they actually merged, and it's all, like, it's complicated. He just doesn't know that happened. And, okay, so the thing I found most interesting about this book was how you could see how the different things, the gods, or the places, or the family histories, or whatever, changed over time. And how Rome itself changed over time. But, like, those things were interesting to me, like, they go from not even knowing what gods are and just having some kind of, like, fucking tree spirits or whatever. Like, I don't know, like, they don't really have a concept of gods at the very beginning. Because the first story, there is no settlement in the area where Rome is. There's just people who sell salt, and they go from basically, like, the ocean, I guess at the mouth of the Tiber, up through to some mountains where they sell the salt to these other people. So, like, they just go back and forth, and they don't have a place where they specifically live. And it was first stories about some people in that group. And then, and then in the next one, there is a town of Rome, but it's not called Roma yet, and it's just like a town. And then you get, stories of Romulus and Remus. I thought it was cool how he took various, like, ways of the Romans kind of, because the thing is that Rome is so fucking old, nobody really knows how it started. This seems like a plausible enough explanation for me, but Rome itself, of course, had, like, its own, like, mythologized history that it came up with, and, there's the 7 kings, there's Romulus and Remus, there's the whole Aeneas thing, which doesn't get brought up until, like, the last story of this, because it's just, like, made up. Like, they're all probably made up, you know what I mean? But that one was really made up. I don't know, I liked it. I liked being able to go, hey, there's the character I recognize from history. And so I want to read the next one. Not so much because I'm really interested in, like, the stories themselves, but I don't know, just I like the overall atmosphere of it, and kind of getting this big overall overview picture of Roman history. So I think it was about as good as it could have been, really. Like, because of its format, you can't really get down into caring about any of the characters. Like, some of them I did care about, I guess, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, if the whole novel were about one person, then you've got so much more time. But it's not. So everything has to be more superficial. But, yeah. I think that's enough to be going on with. So the second book is called Empire. I think that's a weird title. I mean, it's not like the title doesn't make any sense, but given that this one is called Roma, you'd think that the second one would at least be Empire, but in Latin. But also, like, then this one should be called Republic. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But... and I was joking with my family, too, and I would tell them about this book, that I think it would be just funny if he kept writing these books, and this is like this whole long series, and they're all about people living in Rome, but like past the Roman Empire. Beyond that, until finally you get to the modern day, I'm like, oh, what was Rome doing in between there? Like, beyond having popes, I guess, but like, what else were they doing? When did the Pope move to Rome? I don't know. I could Wikipedia this stuff, but I don't want to. I want Stephen Saylor to write a fucking book about it. Alright, anyway. Yeah, good enough. It was fine. Goodbye.